Hello, everyone. I am Charlotte Tweed, founder of Liberty Travel Coach, relocation strategist, and welcome to Free Thinkers Rising. Today, I have a very special guest with me, someone I've known for a while, Paul Rosenberg, a cryptography pioneer, author of 80 books, co-founder of Crypto Hippie and the Fiber Optic Association. Paul, we're going to have a good discussion today about Bitcoin and freedom. So
Sounds fun.
please, yeah, so introduce yourself and we'll get started with some Q&A.
Sure. I spent a lot of years in construction engineering, ended up in fiber optics, got deeply involved with cryptography, let's say in the middle 1990s. Was involved in a bunch of projects. I ran a company for years called Crypto Hippie. We ran a private, how shall I call it, an anonymity service. So if you wanted to be truly, truly private on the internet, this was the way to do it. And we did all sorts of stuff. I won't go through all the techie details because it's probably too much. But we did all kinds of stuff and ran it for quite a few years. We closed it a couple of years ago, but it was a great service, and I met lots of wonderful people along the way, like Charlotte, and it was a great adventure. And now I write on Substack and still do some consulting.
Great. So, Paul, you've been with Bitcoin since the beginning.
Yeah.
You know it well. I think probably better than anyone I know. So I've got some questions that friends of mine have come up with that they would like to know. Some of them are beginners. They really know nothing, don't understand it. And some are a little more advanced questions. So we
Sounds
might as
fun.
well just dive right into it. So we'll start with the beginner ones. How do you get any value from Bitcoin?
Well, I don't know what precisely they mean by value. Do you think they're talking about being able to buy a computer or to be able to buy a car or something like that? Or are they talking about investment returns?
Well, let's say both. Can you
Okay.
buy anything with Bitcoin?
Sure, you can buy things with Bitcoin every day of the week. Um, there are lots of people who live only on Bitcoin, and
Mm.
they, live in houses and drive cars and go to the grocery store just like everybody else. There are now literally millions of places in the US anyway where you can pay with Bitcoin at checkout. Steak and Shake. You can, you can just go in and pay with Bitcoin, and it's quite fine, and they're set up for it. And there's zillions of places where you can do that sort of thing. Or if you want, you can put Bitcoin. There are debit cards you can get. You can load up with Bitcoin at whatever the daily exchange rate is. You want to put, $1,000 worth of Bitcoin on a card, you can do that. And there's lots of exchanges where you can, if you want to sell Bitcoin, um, just they'll do it for you and give you dollars. And there's also you can do it in just with your neighbors. Here, I'll sell you my riding mower that I don't need anymore, and you send me, a half of a Bitcoin or whatever the amount is. And that's real to me, that's the best way to handle it all. But you can do that. And now in terms of investment, what I always tell people, do you think it's a good idea to buy Bitcoin? Yeah, I do. But first of all, buy Bitcoin. Don't buy crypto XYZ. Don't do it. That's for people who totally know what they're doing. And even then, I don't recommend it. Get Bitcoin. It's a proper store of value. There's only 21 million that will ever exist, and 20 million plus have already been mined, been created. It's free it is the best store of value that has ever existed on planet Earth. It's harder than gold by the usual measurements of such things. Um, so get it, yes, but get just Bitcoin and hold it for 5 years. Okay, just hang on to it. Do not trade this stuff. And please, please, please do not check the price every day. It will make you crazy. Okay, because this is stuff that goes up and goes down and goes up and goes down. Now, long term, it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, Bitcoin used to be, $100 a coin, and now it's, I don't know, 75, $80,000 a coin. Um, Gee, Nice. And people, there's so much fear around Bitcoin. It's unreal. And of course, anytime the price drops, there's headlines, Bitcoin falls 25%, the world, it's over. No one complains when it goes up by 150% in a couple months. No one ever complains about that. They only complain about when it goes down. But it does go down sometimes. It's still not a giant currency. It's better money. It just is. Um, but you know, buy it and commit to holding it for 5 years, ignore it, forget about it, and do not check the price. So those are, but it pays off really, really well, way better than the record of it over for the past 17 years is it's like on a logarithmic scale. It's on an exponential scale compared to everything else goes like this, and Bitcoin does that. So yeah, it does this, but it keeps doing it on the way up. So, you know, we got 17 years of experience with this thing already. It's pretty
Yes.
good.
Yeah. Well, you said so much there that is fantastic and so important. A lot of people still think you can't buy anything with Bitcoin. So thank you for
Yeah.
clearing that up. And the hodling, hold on for dear life, right? Buy it,
Right.
keep it, and do not look at it every day. I looked yesterday, it was 81,000. But I
Oh,
have some friends that they're every hour, they're constantly looking at it, and I think you're gonna go insane. It's like when you go on a diet, and if you weigh yourself 3 times a day or every day, you're gonna go nuts and you're gonna give up because
same thing.
the numbers are not doing what you want them to do. So thank you
Right.
for that.
You're
That all
welcome.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm gonna ask another question. This was, you kind of talked about this, don't buy other cryptos. So what is the difference? Because a lot of people think that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are the same. What is the difference between Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
It gets a little bit sloppy on the definitions here. But let me try to make it as clear as I can. Bitcoin was the very first cryptocurrency. That is just a currency that's built up around encryption. That uses encryption, and Bitcoin does. It uses what we call public key cryptography to handle all of these transactions. And by the way, now that we're talking about it, Bitcoin has processed well over a billion transactions. So it's not unsafe. Okay. A billion transactions, and that's just, that's not all of them, but that's over a billion on the blockchain. So, you know, is it safe? Yeah, it's really safe. And it's backed up by the proof of each Bitcoin transaction is a computer hash. Think of it like a fancy signature. That's 16 to the 40th power. That's a really big number. So if you're going to try to break the transaction, good luck. It's something like the number of molecules in the solar system or some crazy number like that. Bitcoin was the first of these, and it is still a unique model for them. Um, the other cryptos are follow-ons. You can take the Bitcoin code and just clone it and make your own. And you can do that. And people have done it, and they've done lots of different things. Some of them are very interesting. I don't think they're all terrible. They're not all a scam. Some of them are a scam. Actually, there's a lot of them that are, if not scams, unrealistically hopeful. Um, but there's some that are very interesting tools, like you'll hear about Ethereum. Ethereum is a way to automate contracts using the same basic model as Bitcoin. It's different now, but it's the same basic cryptocurrency model that they took and modified so you can, do automated contracts, which is really cool. The simple one say we have a bet who's going to win the Super Bowl next year, and you bet on one team, I bet on another, and we each place so much money in the pot. And when the Super Bowl comes along after the end of the game, the system picks up the feed from ESPN, says who won, and they distribute the money. And you can do that in many more complex ways to do all sorts of automation. And it's very interesting, and it's a really cool tool. but it's not an investment. It's a tool. Okay. Now, people have made a lot of money doing it, but it's not really what it is. And I think of it as a tool. There are others that are similar, and there's some that are just ridiculously hopeful. And I recommend staying away from them. They're all built on a similar model, but none of them has Bitcoin's ecosystem, the actual commercial system that's part of it. And that's really where the value comes from,
Mhm.
because Bitcoin can't be counterfeited. It is we call censorship resistant, meaning that there's no one manning the switch. There is no boss, there is no office, there is no reset switch, there is no nothing. It's just a computer program that sits on the internet. That's all it is. And so there's no boss you can put a gun to his head and saying, you're going to reverse this transaction or else. It can't be done.
Mhm.
Um, it's unique that it's that way, and the person who made it, person or persons, who knows, who made it, dropped it into the world, hung around for a few months, fixing any little things that came up, in which always happens. Anything new, you put it into the world, and things go left and right a little bit that you didn't expect. Um, stayed long enough for that and split. They're just gone, been gone, and so it's completely unique that there's nobody controlling it. And by now it has this gigantic, not just inertia, but history behind it, and all of the things that have happened with it and committed to it. It is the greatest form. Well, I said before, it's the hardest currency in human history. It is also the greatest collateral in human history, which a lot of people haven't realized yet. And for people who live, worldwide, who go between countries and live in other places, you really need to have some, because if currency controls happen, which they happened in Cyprus 15 years ago, whatever it was, and they've happened a lot of other places, you're stuck and you're in trouble, but not if you have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is immune to currency controls. It's a totally separate entity. If you can get on the internet, you can trade, you can send your Bitcoin wherever you want to send it. And anybody who lives internationally, I think, should have some. I love silver and I love gold, but you're not going to travel across the country with 40 pounds of gold. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't. Is it possible? Yeah, but is it practical? No, it's not even close. But Bitcoin, you can go anywhere in the world with all of your stash intact, and and you can go through. If the banks are shut down, you're still, I mean, it'll be an inconvenience for you, but you can still move your money.
Mhm.
And so it's really very important for that. So the other cryptos, they're okay. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, but it's not Bitcoin. If you want store
Mhm.
of value, if you want to protect wealth over time, if you want to be able to move wealth when you need to, you need Bitcoin.
Mhm. The peer-to-peer aspect is what I like, you know,
Yeah,
yeah, which you'd mentioned, that the middle person is taken out of the equation.
right.
Yeah,
There's no one who can say, okay, you can send this. No, you can't send this. There is no such person. It's just,
yeah.
if you've got the keys for your Bitcoin, you've got the keys, and you can do
Hmm.
whatever you want.
Hmm. Now, since you had mentioned counterfeiting, I'm going to go to this question. It's more advanced, but it rolls into the conversation. So, what is the wisdom on ever increasing power AI cryptologists' future ability to crack crypto algorithms to engage in theft and or counterfeiting of a cryptocurrency?
A legitimate concern, but not a practical reality. I mean, there's always things to be concerned about, especially in the future with technology and such. Like I say, a Bitcoin hash is 16 to the 40th power. And in order to change one of those, you would have to be able to come up with that hash within about 5 minutes. And If you can't get it in the 5 minutes, now you've got it to two hashes within, let's say, 15 minutes. And that's if everything else works out perfectly. It's a practical impossibility. In terms of AI, it doesn't really make that much difference. They might be able to uh, trace a little better of who sent Bitcoin to whom if you don't use proper security, which isn't hard. It's just, you have to, it's trivial. I can talk about it more if you want in a little bit. Um, so, you could do that with AI. Quantum really is not a real threat at present. Um, to break a Bitcoin transaction, you'd need millions of what they call qubits. Qubit is the measurement of quantum strength, of how well a quantum computer works, how powerful it is. And you'd need millions of qubits to break a Bitcoin transaction. At present, in the best situation in a laboratory, they're maybe getting 100. So, we're a long, long way from that. And it's a real open question of whether quantum is actually able to scale that much. People, you get people on all sides arguing about it. And remember when you see the stories and, on the news feeds, this is all hype. This is all dramatic. This is all trying to get you, afraid or outraged or something so that, they can steal your eyeballs for 5 seconds. That's what it's all about. So, please discount that. Um, Quantum seems to be a real thing that actually works, but to get it to scale to that level is highly doubtful, and it's certainly not happening anytime soon. On top of that, we already have quantum resistant computing. We've already got it, quantum resistant cryptography. And people are already looking at ways to alter the Bitcoin protocol to make it work. Now, the thing about altering the Bitcoin protocol is you got to get everybody in the marketplace to agree to it. And so you can come up with this great idea that you have, and people do this. I mean, people put in Bitcoin improvement proposals, BIPs, um, and they'd write them and put them in, and occasionally one or two of them get adopted. But it's only adopted when everybody in the marketplace says, "Okay, I'll do that. That's a good idea. I'll do that." And if it's not, if it's just somebody's idea or whatever that really isn't tied to reality, isn't compelling, it falls away. So there's already quantum resistant stuff already in the works, but I really don't think it's going to be a big deal anytime soon, if ever.
So how does mining for Bitcoin work?
Well, honestly, that's the secret sauce that really made Bitcoin work because we had problems. There were a lot of digital currencies before. As soon as we had cryptography, let's say by the early to middle 90s, that was really effective, a group of people called the cypherpunks, cryptography advocates, realized we could wall off part of the world and have Terra Nova. We've got a new world. And then you start saying, well, gee, how do we want our world to be? Which is a whole set of discussions. And then we say, we've got communications, we got protection, we got a few other things, but we kind of need money. And then became the problem of how do you make money? Well, there was no way of doing it without a trusted party. You had to have somebody who ran the mint. And you had to have somebody, because otherwise anybody could just, a computer whiz could just whip up the currency on his laptop and all of a sudden mint, $10 gajillion and make everything worth nothing. So it was a real problem and no one could fix it. The guys at PayPal tried. PayPal at the beginning was very different than what it is now. They tried, lots of other people tried. We had a system called eGold, which was awesome, but it had a head that could be cut off. And eventually it did get cut off. So solving this was a real problem. We had a pretty good idea of how to make money cryptographically, but to get it so that there was no central point of failure, this was a problem. So Satoshi took all of these pieces that had come together in cypherpunks, a Diffie-Hellman key exchange, Merkle trees. I'm talking really techie here. Um, proof of work, reusable proof of work, BitTorrent, which people know from downloading songs. That's the communication system for Bitcoin. It's BitTorrent. Um, all of that stuff came together, but how to put it together in such a way that we could do this. So what they realized was, or it's what Satoshi put together. I don't know exactly how. He or she came up with the idea. But you just have teams of miners. Just a miner is just somebody who has a computer that they have a mining program, built into it. I mean, it's actually just the Bitcoin program. And everybody tries to solve math problems. And the math problems are very difficult. And you need a good computer to do them. At first, you could do them on your regular laptop. And these days, you need kind of special chips to do them fast. At the beginning, you didn't worry about fast because there weren't that many people. No one cared. The coins were worth $1. Okay, it's nice to get 50 of them, but it's not a big deal. Now it's coins are $80,000 each, and it's a big business. But anyway, you're trying to solve a math problem. So there's thousands of computers trying to solve this math problem, and it's a very complex problem. It's maybe a couple thousand transactions, each of which has to have this 16 to the 40th, hash and everything on it, and put them into a group called a block, okay, that's tied into the block before it cryptographically, so there can be no messing with the record. And then you got to solve this math problem. Whoever is first to get that math problem gets a reward. At first it was 50 Bitcoins, now it's 3 in a fraction, and in a couple of years it'll be 1 in a fraction. But you get a reward for solving it. So there are now thousands upon thousands of computers, each trying to solve the problem. No one knows who's going to be the trusted party for this transaction. There's thousands of them. You're going to put a gun to everybody's head at the same time? Besides, it's done on a computer. The guy who's trying to operate it, he has almost no way of getting in there and messing with it. So it is thousands of people trying to solve the transaction, and whoever does gets a reward for it. So there is no trusted party, and the transactions are completely reliable, but there is no one person or even one group that you can point to and say, they're the ones who make the transactions. No one knows who it is until the moment it happens. And the program has built-in, difficulty levels that change every couple weeks. And if there's a ton more miners coming on and they're solving them too fast, the difficulty level goes up. If there's not as many miners and it's taking too long to process transactions, the difficulty level drops. And it's all automated. So there's no one having to push the switch. And I hope that's understandable of how mining works. Miners make money by solving math problems to process transactions.
It's math.
Bitcoin is just math, which is awesome because, try to break a math problem. Can you make 2 and 2 plus 2 not equal 4? You can't. It's just there. It's built into the structure of the universe. We used to
Some
say
people are trying to.
Yeah, I know they are. Oh, God help them. We used to say in the old days, you can't put a bullet through a math problem, and that's really what Bitcoin's all about.
So what would be the pan market effect if one cryptocurrency were compromised?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess it depends a lot on which currency and how it was compromised. There's been a lot of currencies that have had trouble, mainly due to the developers being kind of dodgy people, or Electrum or Ethereum had serious problems. This is the one I'm talking about that automates contracts. That's a really cool tool. They had a lot of trouble. They had a major hack of their currency some years ago. But first of all, they recovered from it just fine. Secondly, that's what you expect. They're trying to do some really hard stuff. Bitcoin just does currency. These guys were doing all sorts of automatic contracts and automated organizations called DAOs, DAO, Distributed Autonomous Organization. Awesome idea. If you haven't looked into it, it's worth your time. But they were trying to do super hard stuff, and they made a mistake at some point, and there was a hole in their programming, and
Mhm.
some jerk found out how to exploit it. Those kind of things happen, but they immediately solved it and they recovered from it just fine. And they were, like I say, they were trying to do really hard stuff. Sorry, on the frontier, those things happen. So that didn't really that caused short term, but that was just, the usual fear stuff. There was one point some years ago where the head of the Federal Reserve, the head of the Treasury, the head of the ECB, the Pope, the Ayatollah, the, I think it was Buffett or Munger and Jamie Dimon and a whole dozen others were all banging on Bitcoin within the same 2-week period. The amount of fear that these people come up with is the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing that chases people away, which is its purpose. So outside of the fear of something breaking, I'm sure there's going to be other currencies that are compromised just to doing poor implementation, just not doing it very well. It's part of life.
Mhm. Well, I think that's a good time to change into freedom and Bitcoin and the fear and CBDCs.
Okay.
And how will Bitcoin ensure freedom with the coming threat of CBDCs?
Okay. Well, let me first say that as a friend of mine in the gold business says, CBDCs are the spawn of hell,
Would
and
that be
he's not
rich?
wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's rich. It's rich checking. Yeah, yeah, and he's right. They are CBDCs. There's some who are more demonic and some that are less, but they're horrible, and it's a really bad thing and a really bad idea. It is, if not the final thing, but is certainly the predecessor to something like the Bible's mark of the beast. I mean, it's that bad.
Mhm.
Um, People don't like them, by the way. They tried really hard to get one in Nigeria. That was their test case. And they thought if they can get away with it in Nigeria, then maybe they can move up from there. It didn't fly. Almost no one used it. Almost nobody wanted it, even though they, pulled money out of circulation and tried to really hard to force everyone into it. They wouldn't do it. They actually had to close off the experiment. God bless the Nigerians. Um, I mean, seriously, God bless the Nigerians. But it's a horror show. Um, so everyone should remember that and fight against that any way, any reasonable way you can. Bitcoin saves us from that because Bitcoin is decentralized. There is no handle that can be grabbed. You can't take over. You can't stop it. It's unless you want to try to shut down the whole internet, but we can still send Bitcoin transactions over radio,
Mhm.
long distance radio, not a problem. Bitcoin transaction is only about 250 bits. It's not big. So you can send those, over radio. Would it be a lot harder? Sure it would, but you could do it. Um, and so, they'd have to shut down the internet, which they can't. I mean, technically it is possible, but there's no way they would do it because they would lose way more. They're so built upon internet surveillance and getting
Mhm.
everything from Facebook and Google. There's no way the spy agencies would ever allow it. So um, I'm really not worried about that stuff. Bitcoin is going to be fine. Gold and silver are fine too, but using them internationally, using them. First of all, you can't get a lot of people locally in many places to take them. Now, some places they will, and that's a really good thing. My little complaint with the gold guys, and who I love the gold guys. These are my friends. They're long-term friends and everything else. But people need to use it, not just stack it up on a shelf and wait for the apocalypse. You've got to use the thing. If you want it to have an independent pricing structure, if you want it to have resilience, you got to use the stuff. So, gold and silver are great too, but internationally, forget it. It's technically possible to move gold across borders, but it's so difficult and lengthy of a process. With Bitcoin, you pull up your wallet and you go bip, 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 password, bip, and it's done. That's a lot different from trying to get, a bonded carrier to show up and take your stuff and file out all the customs forms, and takes a week to get to forget about it. It's not practical. So, but those are the things that really protect us from that, and just cash. Cash protects you from CBDCs, and they have plans in place to get rid of cash. They're going to charge you 2 or 3% when you get it out of an ATM or you throw it at the bank.
Okay.
And those sorts of things. There are papers written by the World Bank and so on this stuff. They haven't implemented it yet because fundamentally the battlefield is inside of us. When you get 10 million people to say no, I'm not going to do that, the powers that be have to back up, because fundamentally their power is built upon legitimacy, upon people believing that it's the good and right thing to do to obey them, that it's necessary. My grandfather did it. My mom and dad did it. We have to do what they tell us because it's the only way the world can work. Those kinds of ideas. But if 2/3 or even 1/3 of a country says, no, we don't like that, we're not doing that, they have to back up. Either that, or there's going to be some kind of bloodshed at some point.
Mhm.
And they do back up. Nigeria, case in point, they tried hard and they backed up. So we need people to understand how perverse this thing is. Um, you know, Myself and a few others have put it into fictional books to show exactly what happens and so on. But people need to understand what this thing is. It's not just the bureaucrats trying to find a little more efficient way to make things so that life goes on a little more smoothly. BS. Okay, it's a control fetish. It's a control addiction, and who Rich is right. CBDCs are the spawn of hell.
I could not agree more. And I like gold and silver and Bitcoin. They have two different
Right.
purposes. Yeah, they have two different purposes. And that's what
Yeah.
Rich always says too. Yeah. Yeah, very
Yeah,
good.
they're all good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to the philosophy part of things, and you have a website too that you created a while ago where you put on positive images and the importance of
Oh yeah.
surrounding ourselves with positivity, which we really need to do these days because the fear is coming at us so hard. They're trying to make everybody full of fear, confusion, so that we don't rise up and say no.
Right.
So, we have it in our power to begin the world over again.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. We do have the power to begin the world over again. The line comes from Tom Paine in 1776. I wish I would have known about it before I had, because it's a great line. But
It
it's
is.
true. And we need to, all of us, build the world our way and not wait for somebody else to do it, and not wait for the big moment to come when you're going to do it. Start tomorrow. Start today. And it can be small things. That's fine. If the old couple who live around the corner can't repair their steps because they're aged. They can't really do that work anymore and they haven't got a lot of money. Get a couple of pals. Find some old, some of the extra lumber you've got in your garage, or buy a couple of pieces and go over there and fix it for them. Those are the things that really matter in life, and those things spawn all the others. I tell the Bitcoiners, I was at a Bitcoin convention last week, and I said, I don't want some big famous guy standing up and saying Bitcoin is the thing, we all have to do it, let's go. I don't want 10 million people coming in like that. I want ones and twos. I want the person who goes to a Bitcoin meetup and says, wait a minute. Are you saying that this does this? Yeah, that's what we're saying. That can't really work, can it? Yeah, we just processed, the billionth transaction last year. Really? That's the guy I want. I want that thing because that's building, with solidity. That's building for real, rather than just people getting up excited and running along. So we need to, all of us, everything you do every day changes the world. And I need people to remember that. And it's the accumulation of choices made by all of us that gives the world its shape. Yeah, there's loud talkers in marble buildings and now the social media cultivation of outrage, which is really bad. I mean, social media is the new smoking. It's something everybody knows is bad for them. They really like to quit if they could, but they're having trouble. It's like smoking was in like the 1960s or something.
An
You know, and,
addiction,
and
absolutely. Yep.
yeah, it is. There's no
Yep.
question about it. There's no question. It's a hard thing for people to deal with. Um, but all of that stuff is, we're just going to have to get past it. And it's the choices made by millions of people every day that give the world its shape. And we just have to start doing, taking it into our hands. We're not leaving it to some, fancy suit in a marble building. We have to do it. And it's what we do that matters. And we have to get busy doing things that cultivate benefit into the world in whatever way. Because it changes things. It changes people. It changes you. Don't wait. If you have to do something that's this big, fine. Do something that's this big. That's okay. Start there. If you do the bigger things later, fine. But don't wait. Get busy doing something.
Well, that's the perfect segue into my final question for you. What is one actionable step that someone could take today to reclaim control?
Since we're doing Bitcoin, I'll go on with Bitcoin. You need to learn about this. Find a Bitcoin meetup. There are Bitcoin meetups in hundreds and hundreds of towns across the globe. I'm sure some are better, some are worse, but I've had really good results with them. And just show up and listen to what they're saying, and maybe find one person in the crowd who you think really understands and seems to be, a reasonable person you can communicate well with, and meet them for coffee one day and just talk and see what they're saying and why and what it is. Bitcoiners are very happy to talk to you. They'll buy the coffee and they'll try to keep you there for an hour and a half, because they're really excited about this, and they should be. But find out and meet an actual person. I'm telling you, there's meetups all over the place. Go to them and find out the one guy or lady or whomever in there that you think is really understands it and seems to be somebody you can communicate well with. And just say, look, can you meet me for a cup of coffee one day and explain this over coffee? And I bet you they'll be happy to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. This has been a delight visiting with you and catching up and hearing all your insights in Bitcoin. I've really appreciated your time today, and I'm sure everybody else who's going to watch this will appreciate it as well.